Hi, welcome to Memory Chips Podcast. I am Ann Wyszynski, and I have a collection of potato chip bags from around the world. And every so often, I go through this collection, and a certain bag or bags will bring up memories of people, places, ideas, and I really want to share these with you. So if you please subscribe, you will never miss a bag. If you were listening to this podcast in November 2021, I did an episode with my plastic sons about Fredagsmys, or Swedish Friday Coziness. When I tried to find out about its origins and customs, I kept coming up with research by one particular person, and that was Charlotte Hagström from Lund University in the south of Sweden. Charlotte was cool enough to send me her research, and as I looked over her bio, I noticed that we had a ton in common, so I just kept writing to her. One of the topics that we have in common is the phenomenon of collections and collecting, so I took this opportunity to grill her about why people do it. Before talking to her, I saw the collecting of stuff as a sort of consumerist proliferation of garbage at the very least, and maybe the exploitation of large groups of people when done by institutions. But through talking to her, I realized that collections don't always have to be about stuff. I don't know if you're really interested in collections, are you? Or are you just...
Yeah, I am. And I mean, as working professionally with archives and into museums and things like that, and teaching in archival studies, it's that kind of collections, the professional collections. Right. But I've also been doing some research on collectors and why do they collect.
Right.
And then I've been doing some collections collecting myself.
Okay.
Also.
That's the other thing that we have in common. You know, I'm a librarian, right? So,
yeah.
And I worked in special collections. And so at San Francisco, the San Francisco History Room, and I also worked in the Latin American collection in Austin's. And I worked at the Smithsonian, and I was did that research coordinator, and I helped Native people who were sent by their tribal councils to study the collections at the Smithsonian. I was supposed to be teaching them how to use the accession records, like how to access what their collections actually were. But that was a disaster. It was it was a cultural disaster or a political disaster, or I don't know how you would describe it, but it was just, I was a 21-year-old researcher. That was my job, was show them how to use the collection. And that was all it was. I knew how to use the collection. I didn't know anything about their particular collections. And most of the people that had gone there to study the things in there were men. They were like 18-year-old dudes. And they really did not want to have any instruction from this white girl. And I kept trying to explain to them, well, I know how to access the records. I know how to show you how to get to your collection. I'm not telling you what to say. I'm not telling you anything about these items. I'm just telling you how to find the items. And they would still give me like so much blowback. The head of the department was a Native American woman. But so they wanted her to be the one that was doing it, but she had delegated it to me. Okay, I feel the need for a little public service announcement right here. It's been over 30 years since I had this experience in the late 80s and early 90s. I was doing this internship with the Smithsonian Institution's American Indian program, and the head of the department was Joellen Archambault, who is an anthropologist and a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. She's also Creek. And this was at the height of the repatriation furor. And it was also at the same time that Kevin Costner had been doing his little fantasy cultural appropriation role-playing thing with Dances with Wolves. And I have to admit that at the time, I thought that the problems I was having with the men who I was supposed to be orienting to the collections was a gender issue. And I realize now that when talking to Charlotte, I was in the hotbed of some serious colonialistic, imperialist, racist shit, which we never addressed. Okay, back to Charlotte. You said you do some collecting yourself, so...
Well, when I was a kid, I collected lots of different things, like, anything from stones to shells or whatever. And then I had this collection of pigs, all kind of pigs. But that was too boring because it was so easy to find pigs. That was no challenge at all. So I gave up on that, and I gave all my pigs to somebody else who collected pigs. So it has to be things that are not too easy to collect, but not impossible. And it shouldn't be expensive, and it shouldn't take any big space, because it takes a lot of space out. If you have a collection, you have to place it somewhere. So nowadays I more collect things like, well, not actually collecting the things. It's more like the one thing I do is collecting the names of the commuter trains. We have this in Skåne, where I live. We have these commuter trains. There are 99 of them, and they all have a name. So my idea is to collect all the 99 ones.
What do you mean? So when you say, so you mean collect them by actually seeing them, or just knowing
them and taking a photo? I don't have to ride them, but I have to take a photo of them.
Okay.
I see how many I have left. 21. So I out of 99, I have 29 left.
Oh.
So I have to do some... it's getting more and more difficult to find them now, because I know that some of them are not in traffic all the time, and there are some of them that are on going somewhere else in the country because they needed to have the commuter trains there. So they are on leave from Skåne, so they're somewhere else, and I have to find them. I have to go and take a photo of them.
So can you? Do they have to be in transit, or could you go to the depot and just take? I
could go to the depot if I could find it.
Okay,
but I don't know where they are. Well, I know where the depot is, but I don't know if these actual trains are there.
Can you call somebody and ask?
Yeah, I probably could do that, but it's more fun trying to find them. And I have this list on my phone. I have this, so every time I see one and I'm not sure if I have already collected it, I have to check my phone.
Okay. That's why I asked you whether it's not you were like quote unquote allowed to go to the depot and take a picture of it. Collecting has to have parameters. Like what you collect has to have rules.
Yeah, I think that most collectors do that, and some have very strict rules, and some have somebody else's rules. But then you can make up your own rules. And I think, I'm doing this because I think it's fun. So I'm not doing it for somebody else. And if somebody says that, well, maybe you could ask somebody else to take the pictures for you. No, it doesn't fit my rules, but that doesn't mean that. But somebody else can have those rules if they find it okay.
Right. Well, because that's the same thing with the potato chip bag collection.
Yeah.
Is that I have specific rules that they only make it into my collection if I collected them. I have to taste them, and then when I'm making a decision in the store about whether or not to buy them, they have to be representative of the cuisine of that area. So I'm not going to buy like barbecue flavored chips in Sweden. These are all my Swedish bags. And like what you were saying about them, it has to fit in a small space.
Yeah.
Like these you can push down. This takes like when I squish them, they're totally flat.
Yeah. Well, I could that would be possible for me to collect something like that, but not like, people who have these China dogs or whatever they have, and it takes this extreme, they have to build shelves for them and everything.
Right.
No, that's out of the question. It has to be small things. Or
Right.
yeah.
A couple podcasts ago, I was talking to my friend Ludwig Ödman, who's in Småland, and he collects leg hair, arm hair, fingernails, belly button lint, all that kind of stuff. I know he got his collecting thing from his father, who also collects everything. Their whole house is just their entire house is displays of their collections.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think that it's not that unusual that if you have a parent who is a huge collector, you become one yourself. But then it could, on the other hand, be exact opposite, that you're so fed up with all these collections that you're never going to do anything. All children collect something because that's part of being a child, at least in Sweden. I think I haven't met any kid who doesn't collect something, because this is something you do. You learn that you're supposed to do that. Then not everybody continue doing that, but it could be anything from bookmarks or Lego or whatever it is. All my children used to do that for a short while, because that was a way of learning to categorize, and it was a good idea to have something to collect, because then you could wish for something for your birthdays and Christmas and so on. And one of them collected eagles for a short while. So I think he had 5 different eagles, and then he gave up on that. And then there was one of them who wanted to, it was some kind of, what they call this rodents living in the Alps. In Swedish is called murmeldjur. Do you know what that is?
marmots.
Marmots, yeah, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we happened to be in Austria, and he found a cuddly mermaid, well, a stuffed one, a toy. And he said, now I'm going to start to collect those. It was very, very difficult because he only got one. We couldn't find them. But he had this idea that you have to collect something, because all his friends collected it. So he had one, and then he gave up.
Yeah, I guess that we didn't define what a collection is. I guess it has to be more than one thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. It has to be more than one. But then it could be, you might have an idea that it should be 3. I might say it has to be 50 or something, but more than one.
But the individual makes the rules.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about collecting. I've read your research, and I was looking for books that they had about collecting, and there's a new one that came out that's called Collected, and basically it's written by these Martha Stewart people that used to work for Martha Stewart, so they're like home goods people or whatever, and the entire direction of the book was about how to display your collections in your home, like how to make your collections display worthy. And they just made the assumption that that's the only reason why you would collect things would be to show them. And I thought that was really interesting, because as far as I know, that's not
the
reason.
I think there are many reasons for collectors to collect and what they do with the collections. There are all these people who are organized in different societies and organizations, and they share their collections either by showing their collections or discussing them or whatever they do. But then there are the ones that just collect for themselves. Showing your collection might not be necessary for your collecting ideal. Nobody really cares about my train name collection except myself. But I met it was a couple of months ago when I was, I went by train to a small place close to where I live now. So, and on the train station, when I was waiting for the train to go back, there came this man with a camera, and I saw that he was taking pictures of the trains. So I started to talk with him, and he was a train spotter from the Netherlands, who was driving around in Sweden and Finland on his So we started to talk about Trainspotting, and he was about my age, and he had been collecting trains things for ages, and he had this model train and everything, model railway. And it was so interesting because we had the same idea about why you collect and what you do. And he said, I'm doing this only for myself. So I take photos and then I sort them in my computer, but I don't really show them to anybody. I just like the sorting thing. And I think that is really important to many collectors. When I did my research on collection, I interviewed 2 collectors, and they had huge collections, both of them. One was... he had a world-class collection of toys. So he had actually made a living out of his collection. And the other one, he started on one collection, and then he decided to, when he got bored of that, he started to collect something else. And then he sold his collection. And he couldn't understand that somebody could buy a whole collection, because that's, I mean, what's the idea? Buy a collection that's already collected. But it was good for him, because then he got some money, and then he could spend them on another collection when he started to collect that. And I think that he was very much into sorting things. He had this very structure of how to do things, should they be in alphabetical order, or should they be in like... do they come from a specific part of the country or whatever? And I think that is something that a lot of collectors find that's a very important thing. How do you structure this? And I think that, to me, that is also very, I mean, I'm an archivist, so I obviously like putting things in order.
Yeah.
I think that is, I mean, I've seen that in many collectors, that you have, it doesn't really matter what you collect, but then you do sort them in different ways. You could sort your potato chips bags. Should they be in colors, or should they be in alphabetical order, or maybe when you bought them, what time or whatever age of them? So there are different ways.
Yeah. I have mine sorted by the place where I got them.
Yeah. But some collectors do something. They decide to, okay, you take this out, and then you do another sorting, categorize them in other ways. And what happens when you do that? Maybe you see them in a new way. Maybe you should do that. Put all your green bags.
Oh, that's a great idea. Actually, the way I have been sorting them, originally I sorted them by country. And then as I go through them and speak to people for the podcast about particular ones, I take those out, the ones that I've already talked about, I take those out of the collection, and then they go into another container together. And then once they're in there, then I put them together by thematic content or by, because there's, this project has 3 parts to it. So the podcast is the first part. The second part is making artwork out of the bags and using them as material. So at some point they'll be deconstructed and reassembled. So that's the next grouping. Then the third part of it is that I'm going to open this museum, my International Potato Chip Bag Museum.
Okay.
Which is actually basically just a showcase of the work that I make out of potato chip bags.
But it's going to be a physical museum, or is it a digital one? No,
a physical museum. So it's going to have the recordings from the podcast. So like with, QR code, so you can and then displayed. So of some of so that's the three parts. And then once the museum is up and running, then I'm done.
Yep. So what will you do then? Start collecting something else?
No, absolutely not. And then I also collect umbrellas, but I don't see the umbrellas as a collection either, because for me, it's sort of more of a professional thing, because I'm a foot juggler and I juggle umbrellas with my feet. So I buy umbrellas because I eventually want to fix them up and sell them. But if that doesn't happen, I've given myself a timeline, because I don't want to become an umbrella hoarder. Because I know that's really common with hoarders, is that they there's that fine line between hoarding and collecting.
Yeah. And I think that is really, really interesting, because who decides when it becomes too much? It's often, I mean, sometimes if people have sanitary problems, like they often get, the hoarders often do that. But if you have 2,000 umbrellas and you only have a place to put your bed, and then it's all crowded by umbrellas, most people would probably say that is too much. But if you don't think it's too much, then who decides it is too much? If you have a clean home and you're not sick or anything. So I think that is, because that is also culturally, it's a cultural thing. What is too much, and who decides that? And is it too much depending on, is it, if you put a gender aspect into collecting, men's collections are often seen as more valuable than women's historically. You can see that men have spent more, they have these big, huge collections, and they were all these museum people collecting things. And women have also often collected smaller things, and they've been more like, okay, that's not so valuable, or I don't know what you call that, what you put on your finger when you sew.
Thimble.
Yeah, thimble. Yeah, that is typical female collection things. When I started reading up on this, I hadn't really thought about that, but that is such a difference between men and women's things. So more like bicycles, it's mostly men who collect bicycles. You think they'll take a lot of space. They need to have this a barn or something to put all their stuff in. But the women have more small things. I don't say it's not that way these days, maybe, but it used to be a lot of this. And I think that is interesting also. Who decides what's good to collect? Is there any rules for? I know that when I collect my train names, that's quite stupid. I can see that myself, that people don't really get upset about it, but they think it's a bit funny or it's a bit strange like that. I think there are lots of other things that could be more questionable than collecting names of trains.
For example, what?
Well, I think that things that cost very much, there are things that are definitely illegal to collect, like birds' eggs or from endangered species and everything, or parts of tigers or rhinoceros horns or whatever.
Yeah, that's not cool.
But I think that the categorization is what I think is most interesting by collecting. I think a lot of collectors spend a lot of time on doing that. So this with displaying your collections, that is one way to do it, but that's just some collectors who do that. And there are others who do other things. And then also this with when is a collection completed? Could it ever be completed? Well, what do you do when you have completed everything? When I have all these 99 names of the trains, I have to come up with something else. Because it's finding the things. That's the chase of chasing the collection. I think that is important.
Right. When I talked to my friend Ludwig about his collections, we did discuss that. How do you know when it's finished?
Yeah.
And he was saying, well, mine's going to finish, obviously, when I die. And I was like, that sounds tiresome, that you're going to have to spend the rest of your life collecting all of this stuff. He asked me when mine was done, and I said, mine is done. As soon as I'm done with this project, mine is finished. I was going to ask you, because in your research, you did talk about different types of collectors. I was reading, somebody said that a lot of people who collect things, the goal of the collection is to actually use the collection for making things, and usually it's artists. So like a lot of artists will be like, they'll collect paint, or they'll collect certain materials that they make. And
that is one way to do it. There could also be, I do a lot of knitting and crocheting, and I follow one of these online groups, and there are like lots of people doing the most fantastic things. I'm not very good at this, but I like to watch what they do. And then there are these people who buy yarn, huge amounts of yarns, and then they display, they say, I'm a yarn addict, and then they have this room full of yarn. And then there are others who say, oh, I'm one of those too. And I don't really understand that. What are you doing with all this yarn? But that is one way to collect it. And obviously the idea is to do something with it. But I don't think they do, not all of them, because they just keep buying more.
Right. And that's what I think. So I don't know. That's what I think about hoarders too, because I think that a lot of times with a lot of hoarders, they hoard because they have intentions for what it is that they're hoarding.
Yeah.
So they think that they're going to use it or gift it. That's the other thing. They think they're going to give, I collect these things because I'm going to give them away, but because they're hoarders, they never get used or given away.
Oh,
and so that was what I was saying about my umbrella collection is sort of, when does it just become hoarding? When I don't want to have this collection. I don't, it doesn't bring me any satisfaction to know that I have a bunch of umbrellas. In fact, it's raining right now and I have to leave like in a while, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to use an umbrella when I leave the house. Like I don't use them, and then so I have to give myself a timeline. If I haven't, started fixing them, selling them, or in some way, doing that, I'm going to have to give them up. A lot of people that are hoarders say they're collectors,
and if you're very rich white man, you have another it takes a longer time for you to be considered to be an unhealthy hoarder than if you're a poor woman, for example.
But I don't think there's any danger of you getting that way. How can you be a train name hoarder?
It's Príncipe de Asturias Don Felipe y Doña Letizia Ortiz. 22nd of May 2004. It was the royal wedding in Madrid when I happened to be in Spain there, and I'm very anti-royal.
Yeah, me too.
But there were so many merchandise with this wedding to be, so I couldn't stop. I said, I have to buy something just to remember this. And the amazing lots and lots of things. So I have had this tea mug since 2004. And I think that is one way of collecting as well, when something happens and then they decide to do some kind of merchandise on this, so you can collect things connected to something. And then somebody else come up with this idea that here we have all these kind of things, so now you can collect this. So that is another way of collecting that somebody else decides.
Right. Well, I think that's the origin of souvenir.
Yeah.
Right? Souvenirs to remember, right? And so that's why people make merchandise as souvenirs. Somebody else decides how they're going to make somebody remember a particular.
I think it must be quite boring to do that, but I think, well, maybe one could decide to do. If I were to collect this, I would collect tea mugs from all royal weddings. That would be a collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I do now when I moved here to this town in Sweden, when I don't really know anybody. So on the weekends, I often go to flea markets, secondhand shops. Yeah. And I thought, I've been thinking of maybe I should start collecting something just for having a reason to going there, because I don't really need to buy anything.
Yeah.
It's just fun to go there. But maybe it could be a good idea to start trying to collect them. But I don't know what. And I don't want to have a lot of things. There are so many different reasons why people collect, I think.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you, since you've done research on it. I was going to ask you to kind of analyze my thing. So what is it? Because I haven't. How do you see the potato chip bag collection?
Well, I think that now you're explaining what you do. Before you did that, I thought, okay, potato chip, that's nothing more strange than whatever else people collect, because I know that people can collect anything, and I thought that it's a good idea because it doesn't take up much space. So, but now that you explain that you're going to finish your collection, I think that's there are one way to collect also that you decide that you're going to do this, like this man I told you about, that, well, when he had his complete collection, he stopped and then he did something else. And he didn't even have to be complete, because some of them could never be complete, but he decided that now it's enough. Now I want to do something else. So you fit in that category, even though you are more like you're going to do this art. I think he never did any art of it. He just categorized or wrote about it in different collectors' magazines and so on. But I mean, you have an idea what you're going to do with it. The biography of the things could be important. And for some, it's more important than for others.
I think that's the essence of the whole conversation here, is that the individual person makes the rules of their own collection.
Yeah.
The premise of the podcast is that I find a bag and it reminds me of somebody, but it doesn't always work out that way. So sometimes I want to talk to somebody, like I want to talk to you about collections, but I still need to have some representative potato chip bags. So I was trying to figure out what would be some good bags for our discussion. And you had told me before that you really liked because you've been to China, correct?
Yeah.
And you really liked the cucumber flavored potato chip bag.
Yeah. I wonder, why don't I have them in Sweden? I would really love them.
Well, that's what you said that before, and so I remembered that. So I went through all my whole bag just to see, are there any cucumber flavored bags in Sweden? And there weren't any, but I did find this, which was like the closest, and it has cucumbers in it, but they're...
Oh, the tzatziki, yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably the most close to Chinese cucumber you could get.
Yeah. So I thought maybe this would do for you, because it has cucumbers in it. Sweden has so many potato chip flavors. I mean, as many as they have as in the US and in the UK. So many flavors, but they all taste exactly the same. They're all the same flavor. I mean, the bags are different, but they all are the same potato chips on the inside. It's just salt flavor. Thanks for listening, and if you have any questions or comments about what you heard today, please post them to the review section of your podcast player. So if you use Apple Podcasts, you click on the show thumbnail and scroll down to leave a review. And then whatever happens after that is up to you, but hopefully it's nice. You can also leave posts on Instagram at @MemoryChipsPodcast.